Also encourage everyone to keep wearing their face masks. But the launch of the manifestos by the two major parties have raised concerns over its feasibility. Now, the two leading parties at the launch of the manifestos outlined a litany of promises that they're hoping to execute if given the opportunity, of course, to steer the affairs of the country for the next 4 years. Both parties, however, pledged, among other things, to ensure that tertiary students will be able to access student loans without hassle and also to create employment for these youth. Let's do some comparison of the part of the manifesto that, sort of sinks. So the NPP and the NDC's manifesto compared when it comes to education. The NPP says it will continue to implement free Wi-Fi for SHS and public tertiary institutions. The NDC says it will establish free Wi-Fi zones in all public and private tertiary institutions. Now, what it presupposes is that one says that I'm doing it and I'll continue. The other one says I will do it. NPP will continue to build an economy which will create jobs, and this is the part of the manifesto on employment. NPP says it will continue to build an economy that will create jobs and prosperity for all Ghanaians, an agenda for jobs, they call it. The NDC says it will create sustainable and decent jobs, called, they're dubbing it a Jumapa, which will provide aggressive training and skills development through the skills training and employment program for unemployment and the free national apprenticeship program. So, I mean, these are the two parts of, the manifestos that sort of compare. Moving on, the NPP says it will implement the $200 million job and skill project, which will provide youth-owned small businesses with grants, training, apprenticeship, and entrepreneurial skills. The NDC, on the other hand, says it's talking about the Big Push initiative. It says through this Big Push initiative, it will provide rapid infrastructure development for jobs. The NDC will also support the private sector to create more sustainable jobs and provide NAPCO beneficiaries with permanent jobs. So let's take a look at what it says about the student loan. The NPP wants to make sure that no student who has obtained admission to a tertiary institution is denied access because they are unable to pay fees. NDC says it will resource the Student Loan Trust Fund to make timely and adequate payment to students. Still on student loans, the NPP says it will provide all students, with the exception of teacher and nurse trainees who are paid allowance, an option to the student loan. The NDC says it will increase the student loan to be commensurate with prevailing educational costs. Well, some students have actually been interrogating these two manifestos and will share with us their thoughts on some of the policies outlined by the two parties. So like I indicated earlier at the beginning of the show, I'll be joined by Zoom, and I have Kabu Nati, who is a GJA Student Journalist of the Year and the political youth activist. And I also have Shayal Dean Mohammed, who is into communications. Gentlemen, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me start with you, Kabunati. Do you get the sense that real needs of students were properly captured in the two manifestos?
I mean, yes. If you want to combine the two manifestos at a go, you notice that they try to be exhaustive as practical as they can. If you look at the area of unemployment, each party touched on that. If you look at education, they did. Other youthful sectors, like sports, creative arts industry, education, very, important, they did. So you could see that they try as much as possible to, if you look at the types of youth, we have skilled, unskilled, educated, uneducated. And you get a sense when you get into the content of the manifesto that they try to target, some categories of youth, those in the schools, those out of school, those who may perhaps have what we call the special education needs and all that. So As to the degree who did well, who didn't, who was quite vague, who was quite exhaustive and comprehensive is another issue on its own. But yes, it's quite encouraging.
Mohammed, let me come to you for your thoughts on that as well. Do you get the sense that it actually addresses the key issues that students have?
Well, Gifty, thank you for having me. I haven't critically examined the People's Manifesto by the NDC and then the NPP's manifesto. You obviously will get the impression, and indeed, I think it's not just an impression, it's one anchored in evidence that it is exhaustive. It captures the principal components of, things concerning the youth. You are looking at the NDC's, for instance, student loan, concessions. You're looking at the MPP, also looking at that policy. You also are looking at policies that do not just target the cream of society or the elitist aspects of society, but those that really trickle down and then capture the needs of special people, of women in cocoa growing areas, children on the streets, students in private schools, students in deprived areas. If you examine these two manifestos, you realize that they both, to some extent, have these and many other components that capture youth development, whether it is education, whether it is entrepreneurship. However, the degree to which both parties offer them are significantly different. The degree of, the proposals and the promises differ. And so it gives you the impression that the strategy that will go into their implementation will equally be different. And it also tells the degree of commitment that they also will put into it. So you realize more of the NDC manifesto, it offers more details, for instance, when it comes to education, and then that of the MPP, it also offers, of course, concessions, but then details are missing. Yeah,
details are missing. So, from what you both have said, Kabute and Mohammed, I get the sense you are telling me one of these is vague, and one seems to have a lot more information. Point them out to me, will you?
Okay, so first of it's important to understand the philosophical, or if you like, the theoretical orientation of the two parties towards the youth. What I mean by these words, philosophical and theoretical, is that how a government perceives the youth, their set of beliefs around the youth, for which influences their support or how to help. Now, if you look at the NPP's manifesto, if you go with me to page, I think 180, it defines who the youth should be, perhaps 15 and then 35, and moves on to tell you that they want to focus on harnessing the potential of the youth through entrepreneurship and then industry, if you like, industrialization. Now, if you flip to the NDC side, it tells you on, I think, page 84, that it's going to do what perhaps the NPP says it would do, harnessing the entrepreneurship industry or what have you, but hesitates to add that it's going to create an institutional framework to, project the interest of, the youth. Now, you notice that these philosophies of orientation towards the youth influence or affect their policies. If you look at the NDC manifesto, for instance, the chapter dedicated to the youth development, their first policy statement is the creation of a ministry specifically for the affairs of youth. And they move on to tell you the categories of the youth. Now, if you flip to the NPP's manifesto, if you look at page 154 actually, which is dedicated to youth development, it tells you that their first policy, statement is the reduction of the cost of data. Now, right from the word go, you get the impression that the NDC is focusing more on creating institutions. And for me, if you come to me and then your first policy statement to me is one of reduction of cost of data, it's great, it's fantastic. But sometimes if I'm measuring you by the doability of it and how sustainable it is, I would want to reach out for a vehicle which is going to be exclusive for my welfare.
So talking about a vehicle that is exclusive to your welfare, let's look, for instance, at provision of Wi-Fi in schools. You go to school. I mean, you have colleagues who go to school. What kind of conversation do they have around this? Is there availability of Wi-Fi at the moment? Because the NPP says it will continue, presupposing that it is something that is already doing.
Yeah, I really wanted to interrogate that free Wi-Fi policy. Now, it's a fantastic idea. If you notice, both parties want to provide free Wi-Fi to tertiary students and even trickle down to the SHS. Now, currently, I haven't had a feel of the free Wi-Fi system. Now, they tell you that they've done and they want to continue, but I haven't. I'm an MA student. I'm really into research, and all I know is the facility available, which is being financed by the school.
Okay.
And so I don't know government.
So it's not there for you. Okay. Okay. I really wish that we had a lot more time, because I mean, engaging this issue requires a lot more time, but I don't. Mohammed, let me take your final word on this one. Is your story the same in terms of how you experience, data, the cost, the availability, for example, on campus and among your student friends?
Yes, if you interrogate the facts on the ground, you will realize that, yes, there are some tertiary institutions where these things, or should I say, where these facilities are enjoyed. But it looks more of one that is on pilot basis, because I haven't really felt it, so to say. But what we need to understand is that we must take the conversation beyond the provision of data to understanding whether the actual facilities exist on the ground to ensure that these things are not just elitist. So yes, students in, let's say, deprived areas in the north where, mobile telephony penetration is very low, how will they be able to, have free data? How will they take advantage of that?
Yeah.
These are the sort of things we should be interrogating.
Okay.
And not.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Unfortunately, we have to wrap it up there, but I'm sure that in the coming weeks, we'll be able to get the chance to have more of this conversation. Kabu Nate and Dean Mohammed talking about the provision of the NPP and the NDC manifestos as far as education is concerned, whether or not it appeals to them. Now,